thank you for being here today. It's really nice to see everybody's faces, and just what Linda said, hope come out and walk tonight. I'll be there too. Would love to be able to hang out with you guys and chat some more. But it's really nice to sit with these panelists, and before I start, I'm sure most of you know each other, but why don't we just real quick have each of you introduce yourself and what your role is.
I'm Teri Ivaniszyn. I'm the VP of Operational Excellence and Trade Compliance, and I've actually been with DigiKey for almost 12 years.
Lisa Pittman, responsible for accounting, pricing, and purchasing. I have been here 33 years. A long time.
I'm going to try. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Yes. So Tiffani Harding, I am Global Customer Engagement and Enablement, and in September I'll be here for 3 years.
Okay, so here we go. We're going to ask some questions, and first of all, just wanted to say, before we start, just give you a little data. I want to explain quickly why are we here, what is We United all about. As you know, many of you might know, we evolved from Women in Electronics into We United, and I see just a couple males here, and that's great. We want to invite our male colleagues to the table because we need them to be part of our systemic change. When we first started Women in Electronics in 2017, we had 18% women in leadership roles in the electronics industry, and today we have 16%. So our mission is still the same, is to elevate all qualified talent, is in particular, right, women too, because we're trying to get more to that parity, but we need the men to come to the table. We need men to be the part of the conversation and part of the solution. That's the one thing that I love about DigiKey so much. Your top leadership has always been engaged, always been supportive, and that's very critical. So these conversations are very important. So I'm going to start with you, and Teri, and ask you, so along the way in leadership, it's a bumpy road, right? There's not just one straight line. So what are the factors that contributed to you being where you are? Like, were there external factors, or internal things that went on within yourself to get you to this point? Like, what was it that influenced you?
So I would say the big thing that influenced me was the ability to, in my prior role, I started out at Ford Motor Company on a rotational program. And I went to a bunch of different roles. I did finance, I did floor supervision, I did all these other things, and guess what? I did Six Sigma, Black Belt Six Sigma, and all of a sudden, I found my niche. Now, I could tell you, I wasn't real thrilled sometimes going into some of these roles, but I learned something from everything that I did that I was able to apply forward. And going into things that you might not feel comfortable with, who would have thought I'd be in tariffs? I mean, think about that. I mean, there's roles that you're going to take on that are not things that necessarily sit well with you, but it might be your passion. So being okay with leaning into the uncomfortable and doing things that you might not feel overly comfortable with at first can turn into something that's greater. And to take on those different opportunities, even though they might not be top of mind, I would say do it, because that was one of the best things that's ever happened to me, is stepping into things, being comfortable in the uncomfortable. And it helped me continue to grow and find my niche.
I really like that. I don't know if the other panelists might have any comments or anything. I'm going to get to some other questions with each of you, but I don't know if you have anything to add as far as anything that influenced you in your career.
I just consistently, I think, when people, to Teri's point, I'm just going to add on to it a little bit. When people have asked me to stretch or grow or try new things, I always try to lead with, just try it and give it your best when you do it. And I think that's how you discover and find out what you're good at, what is really you're passionate about. So definitely lean.
So don't be afraid to try, is what you're saying. Then I don't know if you had anything to add before I get on to the next question. You're good?
Yep.
Okay. So one thing I wanted to say too is when we do our SWOT analysis for We United Now, always the biggest barrier for women ends up to be other women. It is so disheartening. That's why groups like this are so important. We don't have room for error with women supporting other women. We just don't have room for error anymore. So this question I wanted to direct to Tiffani. So what practical ways do you use your influence to uplift and support other women?
Yeah, thank you. This question was
Can you
really...
speak up? Maybe
Yep.
speak up.
Can- All right. This question was really important and near and dear to me because of exactly what you just said. So I really kind of focus on 3 areas when working to uplift and empower other women. The first one is mentorship and sponsorship. The second one is advocating for family and well-being. And then the third one is really all around just leading with empathy. But first, for a mentorship, I have been incredibly fortunate to have strong, smart women in my life, both personally and professionally, that have helped lead and guide me, that I'm so grateful for, and I believe it's so important to pay that forward as we go in. And when I'm working to give advice and mentorship, I believe in the adage of clear is kind. How do we make sure that we're being clear? I strive to be honest, strive to be compassionate, with always the spirit to grow women and make them better. Just as importantly as mentorship is sponsorship. How are we sharing women's great accomplishments as we go forward and really highlighting them? It's so much more powerful to talk about the great things that other women have done than to focus on their shortcomings. So really make sure that when you're in those spots that you're advocating for women and talking and congrats and thanking them and giving them and sharing their great accomplishments. From a family and well-being perspective, this isn't something that I have been great at my whole life. That whole work-life balance I've really kind of struggled with. I had a leader once share with me that if a family member calls, you take the call, no question asked. I don't know why I'm getting so emotional about this because it did resonate with me. But the point of it was that your whole being matters. It's not just about work, it's your whole being. In order to show up for work, you have to have a balanced life. Another thing that was impactful for me is my grandmother worked at a job for 40 years, and she never, ever took a sick day. 40 years and never took a sick day. And on her retirement, you know, she was expecting something, I think, to be shared about that, because she was, you know, proud of it. She wanted to be dependable and reliable, and for her fellow coworkers and work, and nobody remembered or recognized it. And so she shared with me after that really resonated with me is, you know, I think my family would have really appreciated my presence more than my perfect attendance at work. So I just think it's really important that we're recognizing that you as a whole being and lifting women up as a whole being. And then finally, empathy. I think sometimes with women, we think empathy is just a soft skill. It is not. It is a leadership skill, and it's a very important one. How do we make sure that we're having other people feel seen and heard and lifting them up and bringing us in as a community? And when they are lifted up, you know, they bring others along with them. So I think sometimes just with lifting people up, it's not a big grand gesture that you can do. It's the thoughtful, intentional things that you do every single day that make a difference.
Really good points. The work-life balance is very difficult, and I would say especially for women who have that mama's heart, right? So I was sharing with Linda and Deanna that my daughter just graduated, and what I was thinking the whole time during the graduation was all the times I wasn't there that I had felt like, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that, right? And that was pulling on my mama heart. But really, she didn't remember all those times. I talked to her about it later, and she said, Mom, you've always been here, right? But I think sometimes also as women, we just naturally feel guilty. No matter what, we do feel guilty. So thank you for sharing that. And how do you feel about feedback, though? So we want to empower women. Can you maybe talk about feedback?
Yeah, just when you are giving feedback, you know, I would just again anchor on clear as kind, be honest, be supportive, be compassionate. You know, and always in the spirit of how do we help women grow? How do we help each other grow? So those are the big pieces that I think are always focused on it. If you feel like you're giving feedback, and if you feel that maybe it's not in the spirit to help somebody grow, then maybe it's not time to give feedback. I often think of that, so just make sure that when you're doing it, it's clear, it's honest, it's compassionate.
I find that very important. We had one of our executive team members say to me recently, please always just tell me the truth. If I ask you, just tell me. Not everyone's going to tell me. Not everyone's going to tell us, right? Just always tell me the truth. And I think that's really important because it's true. Especially as you rise in your career, it's also enlisting the feedback, because what I have found is that people don't always want to give it to you, but it's those people that will give it to you very honestly without worrying about hurting your feelings. Those are the people that really have your back.
Yeah.
So we all have fear, though. This is part of leadership, and I wanted to direct this at Lisa. So part of leadership is fear. It's fear of unknown. It's fear of a lot of things. Fear of failure. So how have you dealt with that?
Thanks, Jackie. So if I look over my career here in the long 33 years that I've been here, there's been many projects, teams I've taken on, third-party implementations. But for me, I'll speak to being asked to lead the accounting team. I think the first thing that probably hit my brain and then came out my mouth was, but I don't have accounting background. Why me? Would that be the best fit? Would I be the best for that team, et cetera? But I accepted that challenge, and it's been 8 years now, so time flies when you're having fun. But I really approached it with, I'm not the expert. I went in with a learner's mindset, what could I learn? What could I read? What can I learn from the team? I sat with team members, I sat with leaders. You have to listen. You don't have to be the expert. Your team is the expert. Rely on your team, listen to your team. Really, what classes can you take, et cetera, just to get your knowledge up to speed. And again, I would still say I'm not the expert on many things, but I have leaders and team members who are those experts. And that's where I rely on it. I would say for me, here's some lessons learned. Again, rely on your team. You don't have to be the expert. Listen, do a lot of listening. Do your 30, 60, 90-day plan going into anything new. What am I plan? What do I need to learn this? Where do I need to shore up, et cetera? But take that time to really learn before you even try to do anything different, right? And with accounting, we really needed to, change our operating systems, get rid of, very manual processes, drive towards automation. I mean, the team just, there was so much work, and still is to a degree, but we've driven a lot of automation, and how do we focus on the really important tasks versus just a lot of the manual tasks. So again, listen to the team. You don't have to do it alone. Who are the people that you can pull in and rely on and get help from, get advice from? Don't be afraid to admit that you don't know, right? I don't know, I need help. Ask for help where you need it. Again, learn and listen. Just be a really good listener. And I think more importantly, it's you can do hard things even when you think you can't. When you're given that challenge and you think, man, I don't know if I'm up for this challenge, accept that challenge. You can do it, just get going. That would be my advice.
I love that, and I think as it just makes me think of now in this world of AI, people worry about maybe their jobs, not being relevant or whatever. But really, I think that now people will keep their jobs if they stay relevant. So if you're a content writer, become an editor. If you're, things like that, think of where your role is and how can you really improve that role? How could you level it up? And so I think I personally believe everyone's going to be so needed. It's just evolving. And sometimes it's really hard to just, keep evolving into the next. So, but anyway, I want to switch and say, leadership, there's a lot of sacrifices and it's not all fun, right? So what motivates each of you when you get up every day? What motivates you to do the jobs that you do? Teri?
Honestly, do you turn it off? Sorry. That's okay. So the big thing that really motivates me is, honestly, I like to be a part of people's journeys. I love to watch the development and watch people grow. And that is probably one of my biggest passions, and that I've told a lot of people. I have so much joy watching people learn something and then succeed to the next level and succeed to the next level. It is the coolest thing, and to me, I actually have goosebumps because I get so inspired by being able to be a part of being somebody's success and watching them continue to go on and be successful in other roles, maybe throughout the organization and even maybe somewhere else. But to me, that's what motivates me to do what I do. It truly is a joy for me and something that I am very passionate about.
Awesome.
So for me, two things, like as an individual, maybe not from a leader perspective, I love to come to work every day and what's a new challenge or problem I can solve. Like that really motivates me. Or how do we move something forward? And sometimes it might even be, we have a little bit of failure. And that's okay, because as long as you learn from that failure and you move on, but how do you build those stepping stones towards, forward motion and progress? So individually for me, I love a challenge and how do you solve a problem. As a leader, similar to Teri, I like to see my team and leaders succeed, or you throw somebody new on a new project. I think of like the Oracle project and how many people just stepped up to that challenge. And I'll go back to you can do hard things. That team did hard things. They were successful, and it's just fun to watch that and have them even see that within themselves. Oh, you have that.
I'm
you.
similar. I think leadership is about serving and lifting others. And when I graduated from college, they had you create a resume in there, and you had to put down your mission statement. And my mission statement was to make a positive difference in people's lives. When I applied for DigiKey, on my thing, still is what my mission statement was. It's still the same, over almost 30 years. I think it's not just about business, but personal. So how do we just continue to serve and lift people up to be the best that they can be?
Really good answers. It's really hard sometimes, I think, as a leader too, because there is a lot of failure. And it's one of those things, I think in particular with women, what we have seen is the fear of failure prevents people from moving forward. So I love what you all are saying, just do it anyway, because you can do the hard things. And I think it's like a mindset thing. For me personally, I've never seen failure as like, oh, I failed. I just see it as a different way of doing things. I don't get hung up on if something didn't work. But I do see a lot of women get afraid to not do things. They don't want to fail. So just don't be afraid to fail. It's not even a failure half the time. It's just a different way of doing things. That's all. So I think if we could take that stigma off, it'll just help you just go to the next. Try new things. But what has been for the panelists too, I wanted to ask you what some of your tried and true strategies are, because early in my career I had a mentor, and he taught me something that really impacted me for my entire career. Like any decision to this day that I still make, I make it based on what he told me, right? And some things that he shared with me. And in this case, it was when you make a decision, make sure it's right and it's fair. So not everything that's fair is right, and not everything that's right is fair. And so if you can say it's both, it's a good decision. And I've come back to that so many times. So what are your tried and true strategies that you come back to when you're making decisions?
Sure, I can go. So for me, my tried and true strategy is to evolve, similar to earlier, always be a learner, a lifelong learner, be ready for what's next. On my board I have, perfect is the enemy of progress. That's one of my favorite sayings. And I think nothing can be truer, right? Like if you're gonna wait for things to be perfect, you won't move forward. Just make that step, forward motion, and get going. And you'll find out pretty soon you'll be farther along than you thought you could be, and you'll be closer to your goals than you thought you could be. So just take that step.
So, yeah, I think consistency is really important in leadership, being the same person, saying the same things, the messages over and over again, not just saying it, but doing what you're saying is important. Transparency is important. I also really believe in, trust in your experience, especially when you've had, a long tenure. You know what works well and what doesn't, and I think whenever I don't trust in my experience, I'm always like, I know better. I should have done that. I wish I would have done that overall. So that's always frustrating to me. But I also believe, I think Dave Doherty has said this, and other leaders that said this, when you're listening, really work to listen to understand what that person is saying, not to just think about how you're going to reply, so that you're really getting into what are they saying, where is it coming from, why are they saying that, and then work on addressing it appropriately.
Terry?
So I think of two things. One is involving the people that do the work. So as I'm doing things, I tend to try, my go-to is involving the people that do the work, because one, it creates ownership of where the decisions are going. They get to be a part of the solution. They're involved in where they're going. So that's something I'm really passionate about. The second one is, we've already talked about it a little bit, is feedback is a gift. And feedback is, some of you that may have worked with me a little bit closer, I'm not afraid to give feedback, but I'm also not afraid to receive it. And the way I look at it is how do I continuously grow? So the feedback that comes to me, sometimes it hurts, sometimes it stings, but what can you learn from that feedback and continue to grow and become better at what you're doing and how you're doing that? So to me, feedback is a gift, and sometimes maybe I give it too much.
I think that's great. Feedback is really good. And also, I don't know if anybody here has dealt with imposter syndrome, but I think every single leader I know, you look at celebrities, everybody has this imposter syndrome. I was just hearing something that Tina Turner had said, and she was saying that in her career, every time that she heard something negative in her voice, like she would, in her head, she would say these negative things to herself, and she would counter it with 8 positive things. So I was like, that's a good strategy, right? Because I think it's normal. If you do feel that, it's just normal to feel that way. I think we all do sometimes. But I also wanted to ask you, so when you have teams and you're in a leadership role, there might be market disturbances, there might be global geopolitical things going on. How do you stay resilient personally? And then how do you lift up your teams during these times? Because it seems like our times are just constantly changing, right? There's just always something new. There's always the next. How do you stay resilient?
I think it's a couple of things. I take a lot of walks. I'll put in my, headphones, whether I'm listening to an iPod, or listening to music, and it allows me to stay grounded and detach a little bit. And you can't always stay in it, and it's hard not to always stay in it, but having that thing that pulls you away, that allows you to just detach from where you're at, to stay grounded. I can tell you the craziness with the tariffs is trying to stay grounded not only for my team, but for teams across the organization. So setting a goal, achieving it, and working as a team, as a unit together is how, to me, also helps you stay grounded. Don't think you can do it on your own, and because you can't. And you won't get buy-in, and you won't move through. So find your relief valve. One is to help you stay grounded, and then be there for your people, because they are probably just as chaotic as you are sometimes in your head. And just be, as Tiffani said, be that listening ear. Be there for them.
So for me, I always there are times where, being resilient isn't easy. And, sometimes you need those couple days just to maybe reset or, but keep in mind, something like my grandmother always said is this too shall pass, and it will. And, if you think of like markets, I think nothing is different from inventory and, pricing, right? The market changes. It's, we have too much inventory. We have too little inventory. Where our prices aren't aggressive. We're too aggressive. Like there's a constant ebb and flow to that. And just reminding the teams, right, that this is just a normal part of the cycle. How do we work together? Make sure you're always, collaborative and working as a team, but also be willing to be that sounding board for your team members. Hey, if you need to come into my office and, you just need to, let it out, and, let's get back to it. But be resilient and just know, really, it will pass.
I'm a talker. I definitely need to communicate with all of these ladies and probably many of you too. So I have to talk my way through things when I'm going through hard times. And I appreciate other people being mentors and listeners to me as I go through that. I need to work it out verbally. That's definitely my coping mechanism.
So, and then I wanted to ask you all, so in our careers, men and women, we've all felt this way before. In times that you might feel undervalued, underestimated, or overlooked, what recommendation would you give for how to deal with that? Because I think it's a normal, every single human has probably felt that in their career. So how do you handle that, and what's the advice you have for that?
Like Tiff?
Sure. So yes, of course. I'm going to maybe share a little example here where I was in a group meeting and I had shown when I was leading a team and often feeling not heard, and we were working on a project. We were working on implementing a system. And I was passionately talking about how we needed to make sure that we had good data, good reporting, that we were able to get the information that we had wanted from this system. And the person leading this initiative came back and said, you don't need to have that on day one. And I was saying, yes, I do. I need to have that on day one, because in order for us to move the needle or to get what my team needs, I need to have data and facts to support their needs and the customer's feedback and drive that initiative forward. And and he said, well, give me an example. So I gave him an example from my past life, and then he came and he's like, that's ridiculous. That's just common sense, right? Why wouldn't you get that? I can't believe anybody ever pushed back on you for that. And I said, well, it's reality. This is what I'm dealing with. So we probably not 15 minutes later in the conversation, I said, hey, I need this. And they said, the same guy that said that to me 15 minutes ago, that I didn't need the reporting, the data, the facts, said, well, how much does that happen? How can you qualify that? Where's the data behind it? He didn't quite say it that way, but I'm like, exactly. This is exactly what I'm saying. So oftentimes when I think, especially as women, I think sometimes we have to show data and facts where to justify what we're saying. And not to advocate, but I think sometimes men they have more. They don't necessarily have to show the data and the facts as much as women. And maybe that's changing then, but that's been my experience. So whenever I'm feeling undervalued and underheard, I work really hard to prepare to make sure that I am fact-filled and data-filled, and I know that sometimes that drives my teams crazy because I ask for a lot of the facts and the data. But I appreciate that. That's the spirit there, is how do we make sure that we're being heard? How do we make sure that we're fighting for what we need and advocating for ourselves and our teams and our customers?
I love facts and data. I'm a facts and data person. So I like that feedback. So what about you all, Teri and Lisa?
So I don't know what I would add that's different than that. Really advocate for yourself. Find someone who's going to advocate for you as well. Like, who can you go to? But similar, get the data and the facts. Like, if you go into something and you feel like, wow, I wasn't heard, or how do you tackle it differently? How can you go back at it? And maybe ask for time for one-on-one feedback. What could I have done better there? What would have got a different result, et cetera? Or how could I have shown up better? And ask for that feedback. But advocate for yourself.
I agree with everything they're saying. Of course, I'm a data-driven person. That's the story of my life. So I love to speak with data and facts. But the other thing I would say is even the advocate for yourself. Be okay with putting it in the room of maybe the experience that you have and stepping away from it too. And not knowing that everybody's going to latch on to that right now. But as long as you put it in the room and then step back and don't get wrapped around the axle about it, and then figure out maybe in another scenario how you put something in the room of, hey, I have experience with that and this, they will grab onto it. But if it is a point that you really need to make to push, it is the data, is the facts that comes behind it. And I don't disagree with Tiffani. Sometimes we have to arm ourselves with a little bit more as we walk into a room to show what we have to bring to the table.
Mm-hmm. Good points. So let me ask you this too. So obviously our entire careers we have to develop. We're always developing and evolving and changing. And the more we develop, sometimes you're like, wow, you have more development to do, right? So we're never done. And I loved, Linda shared at our summit a couple years ago, I think it was, Kevin Wild, right? Where as we grow in our careers and rise, we develop less. And so it's really important that we stay on top of that. That's a personal thing we have to be aware of our development. So what has it been that has helped you all develop? What have been the best areas of development, and what can you offer? What input on staying developed?
Honestly, the big thing for staying developed is taking that into your own hands. A lot of the things that you need to do, you're going to have to learn on your own. You're going to have to jump in. I took over trade compliance. I came in with my quality background and I took over trade compliance. It wasn't through osmosis that I figured some of this out. I spent a lot of time with team members. I did a lot of reading. I did a lot of studying. And honestly, I struggle with the things that are abstract. I struggle with the things where I can't learn how to do something or be successful at something. That's my issue. But I put myself into things, and you have to be your own advocate, and you have to drive your own career and your own development a lot of times. If you're going to wait on somebody else, great, it may come along, but know that you're the driver to where you're going to go and what you're going to do.
I would just 100% echo that. I've heard feedback sometimes from people and or team members where they're like, well, they didn't grow me, they didn't develop me. It's like, that's your job. You have to take the reins and grow and develop yourself. Nobody's going to do it for you. Put people in your lives that are, that you want to be like, that you want to emulate, and then ask questions and learn from them. But you have to be the driver, and that nobody is going to do that for you.
So for me, I think, and even getting, feedback from people, we've done some 360 feedback, et cetera, some of the leadership development, 7 habits of highly effective people. There's just different things I could say, really point you in the direction of what are the additional things that I need to learn, similar to what are the things, if I see something or if I get feedback on something, how can I shore that up? How can I learn? What do I need to go out and read? Be that, again, I'll go back to that, be that lifelong learner. How do you evolve to the next phase and be ready for what's next?
Mm-hmm. And just a little plug, we do have a mentorship program. I highly encourage everybody to take advantage of a mentorship program. You probably have things here internally, I'm sure, but we have our mentorship program with and it has been a game changer for a lot of people. So mentorship, your own research, your own development, learning, super, super important. And then I wanted to ask, and before I do, I'll just give you, I want to ask about mistakes, like what mistakes you have made in your career. And one time I made a doozy. Like, it's not very often that a bad one comes. When it comes bad, right? And so I made a horrible mistake. And so at the time, I was in charge of pricing in the field. And I gave one distributor a price that had been price protected with another distributor. Huge mistake. And so I called my boss, who was also like a mentor. And I said, Tony, oh my gosh, I just made the biggest mistake. Everything's going to erupt. And so he gave me the best advice ever. And he said, Jackie, you made an error in judgment, not in intent. You have to call that distributor back. You have to explain the situation, say you're sorry, but you have to take that pricing back and you just got to own it. And so I did it, and that person was so gracious, and they were great about it. And I always remembered that sometimes you just make a judgment error, right? It was like an error. But I wasn't intending to cause harm, right? And so that was my big mistake. And luckily that guy was, the distributor I called, he was super gracious with me, but had he not, the whole thing would have erupted pretty horribly. Anyway, so Teri, what is a mistake you made that you had to come back from?
I don't know where to start. I make mistakes every day, and what I've learned is if I, own it. I think you really hit it on the head, Jackie. You've got to own your mistake, and you've got to lean into it and figure out how you work through it. As I tell my team members, you learn more from a mistake than you do from always doing it right. You really, truly do. I mean, if you could go back and think about all the things in your life, in your career, of how many mistakes that you've made, and then what you've learned from that mistake, you take so much more from it, and you talk about growth and everything. That's really where that comes in. Like I said, I don't know. I make mistakes on a regular basis that sometimes I was like, ooh, I probably shouldn't have did that. But I did it, versus stepping back and blaming it on somebody else. I can't even fathom, I can't even nail down particular one that I made. There's a lot.
Lisa?
So I think similar. I think, we make mistakes every single day. To narrow it down to one, I'm not sure, but how do you learn from it? Own up to it. I think it's all a very similar theme, right? Own up to it, learn from it. Don't make a bunch of excuses. Just own it. This is how we're going to be going forward, and do better. But more importantly, learn from it.
I wouldn't know where to begin either, too, because I've made a lot of mistakes. The only thing that I would add maybe to that is, when you're moving forward and you can't be afraid to do things because you're afraid to make a mistake. So whenever I'm in a gray area where I'm not 100% sure of what to do and how to move forward, I once was given advice to say, who do you look up to? Who do you, like whether it's the president of the company or whoever it is, and you had to, this decision didn't go the way that you had thought it would go. Like it went maybe a different way because it was gray. You don't know which way to go. It wasn't clear, black or white. What would you say to them to say why you made that decision? And would they agree with the decision you made after you shared that with them? And so that sometimes helps guide me as I'm moving forward. Could I share it with Linda or Dave Doherty, like, hey, I made this decision because of these 3 reasons. This was why I did it. And maybe it didn't turn out as I had hoped, but that was the spirit. And if they said, yeah, I get it, I understand, then that feels a little better. Like, would they understand? It helps you guide you in your decision-making ability.
I like it. So we are getting through our questions pretty quickly. I have one more, and then we can take some questions. If anybody would like to ask questions, this would be a great time. So I want to ask too, and this is very personal because it's different for everybody. But as I said before, obviously it's not all fun and games being a leader. So what specifically is the best part and the hardest part about being a leader? And I'll maybe just start with just sharing for me. I know as I've risen in different areas, my career, sometimes my circle has gotten smaller. I've refined, just even personally, the people that I'm around, just because, as we have talked about, it's that input coming in. I'm just so much more protective of my space nowadays. But what is the best and hardest part for you, Teri?
I would say the best part of leadership, I think I hit on that, is the opportunity to be a part of somebody's journey. I would say I truly do enjoy that and being involved in that. The hardest part is, even, I would say they go hand in hand, is giving sometimes that hard feedback and watching somebody go through it and trying to guide them. It's not easy sometimes, but you know in the long run you're going to help them. But I would say they definitely go hand in hand with each other, but sometimes feedback is hard, giving it and receiving it. So, you know, when somebody comes to you and wants feedback, that is, like I said, a gift. And the one thing that I would say that has truly been something great that I'm going to say here at DigiKey, and not just because we're women in electronics, you know, or we united, I have met some amazing women that work here. And having that circle of women that you can lean on is a really cool piece. And I will say, here at DigiKey, it is something special. It truly is. Like, I look at these women and friendships with them, they're amazing people. And I can call them when I'm having a hard day or if I just need to vent. But be there for each other, and that's pretty cool that DigiKey has that. Just something that I've really enjoyed.
So for me, I would say, you know, the hardest part of leadership, and I try to say this even to new leaders, right? You're no longer we, you're they. You know, and your circle does get smaller. You know, but I also remind people, like, you know what? We also, like, everybody puts their pants on the same way. That I get from Linda. You know, it's just a different job, right? As a leader, it's just a different job. But I think, you know, what I enjoy the most, again, is the people and seeing your team, you know, step up, take on new challenges, be successful, is really part of the fun. And even part of that hard part, right? That giving that feedback, et cetera, but also like pushing your team when there's a challenge. You know, how do you know what's too much versus too little? And I would say at times I probably push my team hard and probably too hard. And so what is that balance? And you know, just knowing what that is, or when maybe you need to back off of that a little bit.
I'd echo a lot of the comments here. The best part is, I think what I've said over and out, serving and uplifting people, that I have a servant's heart for sure. I want to make a better difference in people. I love to see our team members exceed and do the best that they can and see them grow and challenge them and accomplish new things. That's really exciting for me. The hardest part is for sure when you're working to maybe implement something, or you do something that is not everybody's going to like, and you know, they're going to struggle with, and you know that they're going to struggle with it, and but it's the right thing to do, so you got to move forward, and you got to push them forward, you got to give them the areas, the help and support that they need to go forward, because that's where you're going. But that's definitely the hardest part, I think, is when you have to implement change and you know not everybody's going to like it.
Very good answers. So what I will do now is open it up. Does anybody have any questions for any of the panelists? No question. Oh, we got one over here or no?
Let's use your outside voice, Robert. Try this. Right up in.
All right. So my question is kind of about career progression. There's a lot of stuff about like switching companies to make money, progressing career. Is how you might encourage people that you see they're successful here, they do good here, but we might not have progression opportunities for them for years. How do you balance encouraging their career and their progression versus company?
That's a great question. I maybe can start because I'm going to be 3 years at DigiKey, and I've worked at other companies as I've gone forward. And I've never left a company because of more money or career progression. I've left it, for whether it's personal reasons or whatever the pieces have been. But I often reflect back on if I would have stayed with my original company, would I be in the same spot that I am today? And I often believe that when you look at my whole almost 25 years, I would probably have gotten there faster than when you shift company hat. So it goes down to the key elements of being a successful person, right? You gotta work hard. Nothing is ever given to anybody. Everybody hits obstacles, no matter where you're at. The grass isn't always greener. So you gotta water it where you're at and work hard and stay consistent and just advocate for yourself and consistently show data and facts on when you do things and promote that with your leaders. And if you help the business grow, then you'll grow with the business. It just happens naturally.
So I would add to that, if I were to look at my career, and this is why I'm going to say what I'm going to say, is, I was fortunate in time to start when there was so much growth and change, that there was a constant opportunity, right? You can go do this, we can try something new. I encourage you, if you've been doing something for a while, try something new. There's so much opportunity for different roles here at DigiKey, even if it's not like a next step up, but how do you expand your knowledge? And, it really helps you connect the dots. Hey, if I make this change here, wow, that's got 5 pieces of downstream impact, etc. Expand your knowledge, try something new. That really helps set you up and be ready for what's next. And again, I just think there's just so much opportunity here. If you want, there's sales, there's, accounting, pricing, purchasing, there's marketing, there's, technical, and, there's just so many different opportunities. Try some new things. Oh,
Yeah.
PDC too, yes, and PDC. And I knew I was forgetting somebody. But try something new. Expand your knowledge.
I agree with everything that they've said, and the big thing that I would say is sometimes it's not moving up, it's moving across,
Yep.
kind of like where she's going. So how do you make your depth and your knowledge deeper? And if you can make your depth and your knowledge deeper, you become somebody that they want to lean on and that they want to pull in, and also volunteer to go on certain projects or do things, because that also gives you the opportunity to see things. Like, I was just talking with somebody, actually an individual that I mentor, and this individual was saying, hey, I don't know whether there's upward growth where I'm at. And I said, well, why do you say that? What else do you think you need to do? And this individual has now been in 2 different business units. And I said, did you learn from going from one business unit to another? He's like, oh my gosh, a ton. And I said, so where's your next stop? So you've got to look at it as it goes back to the development plan, how do you round yourself out, not just up, because going up will come with time. It might not come to the time that you want, but it definitely will come. And I've been at 2 other companies besides here, and I agree with Tiffani. It is really where I've gotten the most experience, and what has helped my career grow is learning more about the company and being in different roles within the company. That's what has helped.
Does that answer your question?
Kinda. Is that?
Kind of.
As expected.
So, the other thing too, I think what they're saying as well is sidestepping. If you feel, this is what I've seen to be highly effective in so many different organizations, is sidestepping. So, there's not always, I think you said, there's not always a clear path up where you're at, but move sideways somewhere. That is sometimes the best, move side and then up. So, and then it keeps going like that. So that's where I've seen the most progression at so many different organizations, aside from DigiKey as well, is just be open to taking a lateral move. Is there any other questions from anybody? Oh, we got a couple. So in the back.
Corey's running. Right there, too.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so I have a question, it's kind of about feedback and being empathetic. I've been at DigiKey for almost 12 years, and I remember a time, and I'll never forget this. I was having some issues at work, and I really didn't know who to go to, so I ended up just going to one of my upper managers. And at the time, I feel like I just needed someone to listen to me, and she kept on saying, what do you need me to do? Like, what do you want me to do? And I was just like, I don't know. And she said, well, maybe you're just too sensitive. And I was like, okay, well, I've learned now that I won't go to this person anymore. And I walked out of that room, and I thought to myself, you know, I'd rather be too sensitive than cold. And just because I'm sensitive doesn't mean I'm not a strong person. So I was wondering, how do you lead with empathy without being seen as a weak person? And that's like how I felt that day. And I feel like it's almost swallowed me. Like people might be scared to give me negative feedback because I am a soft-hearted person and that I do lead with empathy. And I was wondering if you had any tips to make me a little stronger, I guess.
Go ahead, Tiff, this is your specialty.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I empathize with you. I have had the same thing. My voice is soft, right? And I definitely can get emotional. So those are things that I've had to overcome also. And I think, you know, I don't know if there's a silver bullet there that I can give in advice, but I think overall, as you go forward, you know, you still have to continue to seek feedback, and it's how you can choose how you respond to the feedback that you get, right? But it is all in your actions. You know, it's what you do every day, and that shows your strength. You know, are you overcoming obstacles? You know, your actions will speak much louder than your words as you go forward in time. I think definitely everybody here would say I'm also soft sometimes, but I think I'm also very strong. And I have shown that. I think also when it comes to hard times, you have to show that you can lead through them, that you can persevere, and that you can overcome in those instances. I don't know if there's like a word you can use or a phrase or anything like that. It's just, you've got to show them.
Yeah, and really, if I could just add too, I think a lot of people in general, we use other people sometimes as like a pacifier. So if you think of like a baby in a crib, the baby uses a pacifier, right? And we have to get out of other people's reaction of us, of how we feel about ourselves. That would be the self-soothing. So I think it's super important to know, how do you self-soothe? Because going through life, going through our careers, there's always going to be those people who are not validating, right? Who are not going to validate your reality. So it's just a matter of having also confidence in your reality and how you're feeling and validating that for yourself. So what I would just say, we don't always get the validation. It's, you know, unfortunate, but we just don't always get it. And sometimes we have to rely on self-soothing. It just comes down to that sometimes. I don't know if anybody else.
No, the only thing I would, there are going to be people that give you feedback, or you go to talk to them and their feedback is not helpful.
Right.
Get to know your tribe,
Yes.
and get to know the people that you can actually get valid, good feedback from, good and bad. I know one thing when somebody steps into the room, because I am a blunt person. I'm happy to say that, but when they step into the room and they ask me for feedback, I say, okay, I always say, and I'm looking at an individual that has asked me for feedback, and I always say, how blunt do you want me to be? What would you like? How would you like me to give this to you? Because it doesn't land the same with everybody else, and that's one thing when you're giving feedback, keep that in mind. Just the way you give feedback to one person can't be the way you give feedback to another person, because they all register it a little bit differently. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just us being human. So find your tribe, find the people though that you know you can get some good, honest feedback from.
And then we had one more question, and then that's the last question we could take.
I would also like to give some feedback on that. When I go in to talk to somebody, I will often clarify beforehand, or if I'm the leader being asked, I'll say, I'm looking to vent, or I'm looking for a solution.
It's very true.
So when people come in,
Yes.
when she was asking what do you need from me, I think she was, or they, I don't know, they were looking to know, they were looking for, if you wanted a solution, in reality, you were maybe just looking to vent.
Yeah.
So my advice is to clarify that when you go in, what you're looking for. Now, my question is, so as I've been listening, you might have answered it some in your resiliency, but when there's challenges, say yes. Say yes. Say yes to the challenges. Okay, I've said yes to all the challenges. Now I'm overwhelmed and I just want to hide under my desk. When you get to that point, how do you dig yourself up? How do you get to the point where you're not feeling overwhelmed?
Drugs? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. So the way I would put it is we all are going to face those times in our life where you feel like you're, and I tell my people, I'm going to keep piling on you till you tell me mercy. And I think that's the way a lot of us work, is when you find somebody and you find that they can do something, you just keep putting something on them. Be okay. There's going to be times you can say no. There's going to be times that you can say, this doesn't fit me, and I'm going to be very vulnerable up here for you guys. Quote to cash. I was helping lead that. I knew that wasn't my strongest skill set, and I struggled. Like, I wanted to crawl under my desk. I wanted to hide some days. Like, it's hard. You are going to step into situations where when you go home, you want to cry because you just don't know how to work through it. But those are the times when you need to reflect into yourself and figure out how can you get through it and have those honest conversations with your boss. Seriously. And you have to be there to say, you know what, right now I am completely overwhelmed and here's why. And if you have a good leader, they're going to lean into that. And I have a pretty darn good leader over there. So I would say that really helps me out as well.
Along with that, I would just add, when you're feeling overwhelmed, how do you prioritize what you're doing? We all love to multitask, but you really can only do one thing at a time, right? And so you have to do the most important first. And, and again, have that conversation with your leader, like, I've got these things on my plate. If everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. So how do you prioritize, and, which things do you really need to tackle first? And which things either can you ask for help and get help on? Or, maybe they need to wait a little bit. So don't be afraid to ask for help and delegate some things, and who else can help you along the way.
Yeah, I think that's one of the greatest, skill sets as you go progress throughout your career, right, is on how do you prioritize your efforts. And I think it's okay, too, to come back, like, when you have prioritized what you think is most important, to move out dates, to say, okay, I think these are the most important, and then I can do these later. So you're not necessarily letting people down or dropping any balls, after you've delegated, but make commitment statements and move dates if they're not as important.
And it's just normal. I know, okay, one last, we're at time, but just to last comment on your question too, I think what you're feeling is just normal. You're taking on new projects, and sometimes you get to that point. I think everybody has those times where you want to crawl under the desk, but when you come out the other side, you're just so much more resilient just because you went through it. So, anyways.
It's on the same subject, but how do you know that your feeling of overwhelm isn't just self-doubt?
Ooh.
That's a great question, Chrissy.
Wow. Well, there's not enough hours in the day to get it done. That's usually my first sign. I'm working 24 hours a day.
Yeah, there is a lot of self-doubt. I mean, don't get me wrong, the self-doubt, like when I talked about my vulnerability with cook, it was a lot of self-doubt. Like, can I do this? This isn't my background. This isn't something, and as what I told Linda is, I can't pick up, I like to learn, and I can't pick up and read, how do I do a system? You know what I mean? There's things that you can learn, and it is self-doubt, but sometimes you have to push through that, and I am an overthinker beyond belief, so sometimes I have a lot of self-doubt in myself. And honestly, it's pushing through that self-doubt and trusting yourself. You gotta trust yourself, because no one else is gonna trust you. I mean, they will, but ultimately you've gotta trust yourself and be able to lean into trusting that you can get through this. It might not be perfect, but trust in who you are that you can do it.
For me, it's come up with a plan. So when you're feeling like that, like you just got to sit down and go, okay, even if it takes you a couple days, right? Like what's going on, what's getting in my way, and what's that first step? Again, that forward motion, take tiny steps. You don't have to eat the whole elephant at one time.
Lisa? Tiffany, sorry.
Yeah, I echo just one thing at a time, right? Break it down, as she's saying, to, how do you break it down? Tackle the first, maybe it's the easiest thing first, so you can get your momentum, you can see some progress, build more confidence in what you're doing. So,
We are our worst critics.
yeah.
We are. And just do it anyway.
Do it.
Do it scared, do it doubtful. You just do it. So this has been a great discussion. I just want to thank our panelists for being here and for being such solid role models. I think everybody needs role models. So thank you for everything you do at DigiKey. Thank you for being leaders, and thank you for being mentors to so many people. And appreciate that everybody showed up to be here today.